In this lesson, we'll have a look at importing a bank statement. So what we've got here is a bank statement we've downloaded from the bank, and there's not a lot of information in there. But when we download the file from the bank, often they don't have headers, or they'll have headers that don't really match the system or whatever else. We can see each line here is a transaction that's been carried out. So we've got a date, it's got a label, it's got an amount, and it's got a cumulative balance is what we call that. So we start off with $9,500 in the system, and our first bill came in, and that was for $330, so we paid that. So that's a negative amount because it come out of our bank, and so the $9,500 is now $9,170. And then we paid the second one, which was $99, and so it's gone down by $99. And then we've got some bank transaction fees that we've had to deal with, and that's 82 cents. And so that's a new entry in there. We didn't enter that, but the bank has charged us for 82 cents for a transaction fee. So we're going to need to work out some way of dealing with that. Then as we move up, we've got a couple of payments here that we've received from the work we've been doing. So first things first, let's firstly manage this bank statement, the import, because we are going to import it. We're not going to type all this in one by one. We're going to import this statement, and then we're going to validate and reconcile. So the first thing we need to do to import this statement is put some headers in there. At the moment, this doesn't come with any headers, so we're going to need to add some. And they're really just a label that tells the system where to put this information, and it's not too onerous. All I'm looking at here, I'm using a product called LibreOffice Calc, which is not just a spreadsheeting type application. If you're using Excel, that's great. This is pretty much identical to it. If you're using Google Spreadsheets, that's great too. They're only CSV files, so lots of editors can modify them. Okay, let's get on with it and add these headers. So I'll click on the one which highlights the entire line, and then I'll right click and I'll add insert row above. So in your program it might be worded slightly different, but as long as it achieves that goal of putting a row above, that's what we're looking for. So I'll click in that first cell, and what I'll do first before I do that is I'll make this a bit bigger. And here I want to type in statement space lines space a forward slash a space and date. And I'll push enter just to lock that in. So this is our date field, and this is going to go on our bank statement lines, and it is a date. So this header will match up with the system perfectly. And to save me typing, I'm going to make this one bigger and this one bigger. And I'm going to make sure that's highlighted, and I'm going to copy this by Control C and then paste it with Control V, or I can do right click on the next one and paste that in there, and that achieves the same goal. Now this is a date, but this is not a date. So this is this is definitely a line in the statement, but this is what we're going to call label. And we'll push enter on that. And then this one is not a date either, it's an amount. Push enter. And then I might make this a little bit shorter, make this a little bit bigger. This column is a cumulative balance, and we're not even going to use it. So I'm going to put in the word bell just to give it a label, just so it's not empty. But we're not even going to use it, so I'm going to pretty much ignore it. So that's pretty much our bank statement. That's all we've got to do is add that one line, add those three headers, put something in there, and that's about it. That's preparing our statement. What I'll do now is I'll save this as, and it's already got the name of the file there, but what I'm going to do is add a with headers. Put a W for with, and then headers. And I'm just saving this on my desktop so I can find it easy. That way I've still got my original here and I've got my one with the headers here. Make sure that the file type is CSV and we click save. And that's done. So now that's saved, we can close that. We don't need it anymore. So the first step is that we've downloaded our bank statement. The second step is preparing the bank statement. Now, normally what we do is go and import that statement, but I've got to do one other thing, because if you recall, we had that bank fee line, and we don't at the moment know where that's got to go. So if I go to configuration and then down to chart of accounts, bank fees are an expense. So we've got our 106 accounts here, but that's everything. So let me turn on the filter for just expenses, and it brings us down to our 44. Now these top ones are all cost of revenue, so these are cost of making money, effectively, is what that's saying, which is a type of expense, but it's one that goes into building things or selling things for a profit, that kind of thing. And you notice that all of these have a number that starts with 5. So they're all in the 50,000 range. So all the expenses start off with 60,000, 60,100, 60,100, 60,000, 61,200, and so forth. If we have a scan down this list of expenses, when we scan through looking for, so where can we put these bank fees? I'm not quite sure that there's anything there. So looking through, though you could argue, you could squeeze them into somewhere, because at the end of the day, does it really matter? Well, yeah, if you want to keep track of where things are going, these bank fees don't really fit into many of these categories, or these accounts, I should say. So maybe we need to think about creating a new one just for bank fees. And that way, if I ever want to do some analysis on my bank fees, they're all in one place. So there's an obvious gap here. I've got 61,000, and then I've got 61,200, 61,300, 61,500. So I've got a gap here between these two of 400, and I've got a gap between these two of 100. Not of 61,100 and 61,400. There's a gap there. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter as long as the number's unique, but following the codes and putting them in the right places does make housekeeping a lot easier. So I'm thinking between these two is probably a good place. So if I made another account with 61,100, is probably a good place to put that. So let's click on the create button. I'm going to type in 61,100. Now I have to give it a title, a name. I'm going to call it bank fees as an account. I'm going to call this, make it of type expense, because we do need an expense account. I'm going to make it reconcilable. I will save this. And so creating a new account, that's all there is to it. It's a pretty easy thing to do. That being said, I wouldn't go overboard with it. I would only create them when I need them. But yeah, it is fairly straightforward. So now I've got that, I can get back onto my import of the statement. So go back to my overview, and we've got our bank tile here, and this is a bank statement. It's not a cash statement, it's not an invoice, it's not. So I'm on my bank tile here, and I click on the 3 little dots, and I can view statements, I can view operations, I can view customer payments, vendor payments, and internal transfers. I can create new ones from here. I can do some reconciliations models here, which is a bit more advanced. I'm just going to click on view statements, and at the moment I'm viewing all my statements, and of which there are none. So I could create a new one and manually go and create that statement, but I don't want to do that, especially when the file's going to end up, if we've been operating for a year or two, then maybe there's a couple of hundred lines per month or something like that. I probably don't want to enter those manually. So I'll want to import them, and I can click on favorites and import records. And just by the way, you can import just about anything, products, customers, update prices, you can do all sorts of things with the import functionality. We'll click on import records, and it asks me to upload the file, which I'll do. and I can see that one. I've got the headers in there. I'll open that one up, and you see, because we've typed in the heading correctly, statement lines / dates, they're the ones that we typed in. The system has gone and matched it with the real ones in the system, and so now there's a perfect match between those things. Balance is not going to be imported. You can tell by this, to import it, select the field. We don't want to import it. We're not really interested in that. We just want these three. This one just comes on the statement anyway. The next thing we want to do is test. So we should always test before we import, just to make sure everything looks correct. So I'll click test, and it tells me that everything seems valid, which is good. It doesn't mean the numbers are accurate. It doesn't mean that the words are correct. It doesn't mean your spelling's right. It just means that from a data point of view, the data looks kind of right. But it's always good to have that little sanity check first. You know, if you've got a problem here, you've got to go and deal with that, and then maybe try again later when you've fixed up whatever the errors were. All right, so I'll import this, and now I've got, it said one record successfully imported, and that's this one. Go away, you. So it's in that bluey green colour, the blue colour. So that means it's a draft, and we'll click on it to open it up. So it's imported one record, one statement, but it's got a number of lines in there. So that's what that means. It's not that, it just means that there's one record, as one statement has been imported. So I can see that all those numbers pretty much match what we saw on that CSV file. So they look correct. All looks good. Now what the system's done here too is that it doesn't have a starting balance, because it looked at the previous statement to see what the starting balance was, and because there was no previous balance, the system said, well, I'm going to put a 0 because I can't find a previous statement. And that's true. We don't, at this point, we don't have a previous statement. When we do this the second time, the system will know. So we only really need this once. So we need to update this field to start with. It can work out what the ending balance is, because at the moment, if I start with nothing and then I add all these up with all the pluses and minuses, I end up with a positive number of 3,000, which is what we have that computed balance down here. They just match. So let me edit this, and we can put in our 9500, which is the amount we've got in the bank, and I'll click away, and you'll notice that the computed balance is now updated. It hasn't updated this line, but it has updated the computed balance line. So what we need to do now is have match the ending balance. So what I'll do is I'll just copy it from down here. I could just type it in, but you know, just keep an eye out. There is a space between that $sign and that 1, so just be careful when you paste in, you don't copy that that space in there, or you can manually delete it if you do. Now that's done, I'll click away, and sure enough, everything looks right. And if we click on post, now if those numbers did match up, if the $9,000, if the ending computed balance didn't match the ending balance, we'd get a warning when we tried to post. But given that we copied it across, that's unlikely. But nevertheless, that is a bit of a safeguard. So you can post this entry now. And you notice it's moved from in that new draft form, it's now in the processing form. So we can process this bank statement, which just means we can use it to reconcile some of these payments and monies we've received with things in the system. And that's what processing is all about. When we've reconciled everything, we can then move it to validated. So that's it. So now that's effectively it. And really, it takes 2 seconds to do. Once you get the hang of it, it's really not an onerous task. We'll go back to our dashboard, and I can see I've got 5 items to reconcile now. So there are our 5 lines that we had on that statement, and the system still recognises that we've got this money coming in, but it hasn't been matched to anything yet. So it has updated the balance in the general ledger because we've posted it, but it's still saying we haven't matched this $3,729 with anything yet. So we need to do that, and that's what we do when we reconcile. So let's click on that. Now, what we've got here is our 5 entries. So here's the first one, second one, third one, fourth one. I'll scroll up a bit, and then fifth one up top. And when the system opens up, so it opens up the first one for processing. So this one hasn't been opened up yet, but this, I'll just draw a line around it with my mouse, is our first one we're looking at. So we've received a payment of $2,376, and the system's gone looked and said, "Oh, this looks like that one," and it kind of does, but that's not the same amount. So the system has tried to match it, but it got it wrong. So we just need to keep an eye on. Don't just blindly trust the system. It tries its best. So we might not have had the right labels in the right places or whatever else, but for some reason the system hasn't picked the right one this time. So we can go to miscellaneous matching. This is the one that thinks it is by default, but let's go to miscellaneous, and then here we've got all our other bits and pieces. So we look at this one, and that one does match. So if we look over here, those two numbers match. So that's the one I'm looking for, not the one that it thought. So that's good to know. So I click on that, and it goes, okay, let's put these two together. And if I validate, that means that will link these two guys together from that point onwards. And that's what we want to do to reconcile. That's what we call reconciling. So I'll validate that, and now it disappears because it's done, it's been processed. And later on we'll go and see what that looks like in the back end. Again, it's just so you're aware, this is the invoice we just created an hour or so ago, and so it's thinking, well, maybe it's this one, and so this is a part payment of this one, and that could very well be, but we know it's not. So again, we'll go to miscellaneous matching, and this is our insurance broker. So those numbers match, and we know that that's correct. So click on that one that puts them together, and then we can validate, and then that's processed. And again, same with this one. We'll go to miscellaneous matching. There's $99, and we validate that one. Here is where we've got the odd one. This is our 82 cents we've got for the bank fees, and we have nothing to match it here, nothing to match it here. So what do we do with it? We need to do a manual operation. So in a manual operation, we say, well, what account is this going to hit? And from here, if we put in bank fees, is our account we just created a few moments ago. So we can select that one, and it gives it that label, which is good. There's no taxes on bank fees, and so that's all good to go. We've selected that one, and it's because we've selected the account, it's popped it up here for us as new, and they match, so we can validate, and that's that bank fee dealt with. And then our last one, miscellaneous matching, which is our last one here, and we validate, and we get the smiley face, so we're all good. Let's go back to our dashboard, and we look at it now, and we have the correct amount in our bank that matches our the amount that was in our bank transactions in our bank statement. So that's it. We've successfully imported the bank statement. We've reconciled all those entries, including the bank fees one where we had to create a new account. So from now on, we don't need to create that account anymore. We can just associate it with that account and validate it. Yeah, so that's pretty much right to go. And I think we're in a pretty good place. So let's just now go and have another look at that statement. So I'll go into the three dots and then go to view statements. Here is that bank statement that we imported, and it's still in processing state. I open it up, and what the system has done is it's put the partner in there where they are available. If like Cameron's Concrete has given us money, the insurance brokers Proprietary Limited took some money from us in the form of bills. And over here I can revert the reconciliation if I need to. So if I need to back this out because I made a mistake, I can click on that and go and fix it up. Whilst it's still in processing, I can still play around with these a little bit. I've got a little bit of space there. And that's it. So we can see the impacts of importing that statement. So as you can probably appreciate, when you've got maybe even a couple of hundred lines in your statement each month, this can really speed things up. You just import it, match up each transaction with its partner in the system, and then and it cross checks and makes sure that your ending balances actually match what's in your bank. So that's been quite a reasonable sized lesson in just how to import those bank statements, and that's where we might leave it for this lesson. So I'll see you on the next one.